Hello again everyone, Mini News is here, coming in with the second video for the Waterloo Video Game Swap pickups in greater detail. In this case we're combining the NES and Genesis / Mega Drive things just because I picked up less titles for this system and to keep it brief. Starting off on the NES side of things, we have Street Fighter 2010, The Final Fight. As you can probably guess by what you're seeing, this has nothing to do with the Street Fighter fighting game series that everyone is much more familiar with, although this is also made by Capcom. This particular game actually came before the release of Street Fighter 2, if I remember correctly, and is actually kind of a more sci-fi action platformer style title, where you play, depending on your localization, as either Ken or Kevin Stryker, if I remember the last name correctly, and basically are zooming around the universe in pursuit of the killer of your best friend and former partner. This particular platformer has a lot of what you want in a good kind of action title here. Good graphics, an excellent soundtrack, rather surprisingly so, and the only thing which makes it that I don't give this an instant recommend is the actual control scheme, which takes some getting used to. To kind of sum it up, while your general attacks are pretty nice, it's actually kind of harder to aim your attacks in the air, and as it turns out, or at least I haven't found it yet, there's no real way to effectively attack anything that's around foot height of your character, because your character can't crouch and attack. And also, attacking while climbing can prove problematic at times. All in all, still a pretty good game. I can't say it's a must-have unless you really are a fan of the genre, but it's definitely, you could definitely do a lot worse than getting this title here. Next in line we have Life Force, a game by Konami that is part of the Gradius series of games. This game offers a lot of things which are great about the Gradius series as a whole. You can play up to 2 players in this case, with the first player being Vic Viper and the second one being Lord British, or Road British depending on the translation there. Really nice soundtrack to go along with it, interesting bosses and stages to go along the way. This game also happens to offer both horizontal and vertical scrolling sections. The only thing I can think of which is slightly diminished compared to other Gradius titles is that the upgrade tree is a little more limited in the fact you can't actually change it, instead of the more variable ones that do appear in other titles. That's probably the only downside I can honestly think of for Life Force here. So if you do get a good chance to get it for a nice affordable price, no reason not to. Easy to recommend, highly enjoyable. Just don't be surprised if you find yourself getting blown up by gotcha moments like that whole closing chasm that just appeared on screen. I have to admit, that got me at least once or twice. Moving on to the Sega Genesis end of things, this particular game I believe I picked up from the Sega dude, whose website is the Sega Collection .wordpress.com for anyone that's curious. I'll try to insert this in a note later. I picked up a copy of Daima Kaimura from him for not too much. Fair price, I'd say. And I was actually pleasantly surprised, as you can kind of see here. Everything is in English. I had forgotten that in some games, especially early on in the system lifetime, if you played games from a different region on a system that has a different region setting, they would actually have code and language from the basically all the regions already in the game. So once it detected a different region, it would basically play the appropriate system. In this case, playing all the North American graphics and language code. The other game I can think of that I have offhand that does the same thing would be Bare Knuckle, aka Streets of Rage. So suffice to say, getting a copy of Ghouls'n Ghosts, or I'm saying Ghouls'n Goblins in this case, for relatively cheap, it's a nice bonus since I know if I picked up the normal North American version, I would have probably been paying double with this, depending on where I picked it up from. So, if the Sega dude ends up seeing this, thanks for the deal, it's nice to have. Getting back to the actual game itself, it's a Ghosts and Goblins game. You should probably know what that means. Very difficult game if you don't learn the whole thing and how all the enemies, placements, and everything end up appearing. Generally speaking, the soundtrack, really nice. Graphics handled pretty well in this case. It doesn't feel like it deviates too much from the original arcade titles, which is not a bad thing at all. So all in all, if you happen to find this game, go ahead and pick it up. It's definitely a nice pick. And if you happen to find a less expensive Mega Drive version, definitely pick it up because you will, as you can see for yourself, you're not missing anything with the language. There's no language issues whatsoever. All in all, good find. Next up, we have the second of the Rolling Thunder trilogy of games. For this spy-themed shooter title, we're actually able to pick between two different players this time. The returning Albatross, which is what we see on screen, as well as his sister Eliza, who was originally kidnapped in the first title and had to be rescued, but is now joining us for a playable role. Regardless of which character you choose though, you're really only limited to 2 hits, be it either getting sucker punched by one of the enemy terrorists here, or even getting mauled by a panther in some occasions. But overall, you kind of have to really be careful with your own placement as well as general enemy placement. Thankfully, you don't get hit by just bumping into enemies randomly. Another thing to keep an eye out for is that you do have limited ammo in this game, although technically that's a bit of a misnomer, as in this case, once you realistically run out of ammo, that just means you'll only be able to fire 1 bullet at a time rather than try to spam them. Much like its predecessor, the game is visually split up between 2 different planes for the most part, which you can hop up and down from in most situations, and you're still hiding behind doors or entering and exiting doors in order to either find cover from general enemies, refilling bullets for your main gun, or going into the power-up rooms in order to get more powerful weapons than your main pistol. If you happen to come across this game, it's a safe pickup, I'd say. Although, from my own personal experience, I was actually having a bit of trouble finding this and the second game a little bit, and this one only being kind of the one copy I saw at the swap, which is why I had to pick it up pretty shortly after, and the third game is a bit rarer, to my understanding, and goes for a bit more. If you happen to come across it, definitely pick them up though. For the last game to highlight on this particular video, we're going to be looking at Puyo Puyo 2 by Compile for the Sega Mega Drive. Just as a full disclosure, I did pick a copy of both the first and second game for this particular series, but there's a specific reason why I'm not covering the first game. Namely, for those that aren't familiar with it, if you happen to have played Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine for the Genesis in North American regions, it's actually a reskinned version of the first Puyo Puyo game. So realistically, people are going to be a little more familiar with that title, as opposed to this game, which, as far as I'm personally aware, never hit North American shores. Which is a pity too, because it's overall an improvement on the actual model itself. Namely, for one, it's a lot more colorful than the previous game, which, for the most part, was kind of using the same general set of tiles and graphics for everything all along there, which is kind of a dirt-looking green color that was kind of used all over the place, which is unfortunate. It was kind of boring to look at, to be honest there, and even then the game felt a little slower as a whole. As opposed to here, everything's a little more colorful to start from the get-go, and I honestly felt I was playing it. This might be entirely subjective here, but I felt the game played a little faster, and had a little more visual interest of stuff that was going on there. All in all, Puyo Pop is... Why am I saying Puyo Pop? Puyo Puyo is a very fun puzzle series of games, which can be played as a single player mode as I have here, or played competitively as well. So all in all, you can definitely have fun all around. It's a little harder to understand what's going on in the story mode though, just because, unfortunately, as it's untranslated there, entirely in Japanese, I can't understand a word of what's going on there. But even then, it doesn't change the fact I'm having a lot of fun along the way there. I don't imagine anyone is going to be too terribly surprised by this, but if you happen to be a fan of the puzzle genre as a whole, I can definitely recommend picking up Puyo Pop 2. Not so much Puyo Pop 1 off the top of my head, unless you happen to be able to find it for fairly cheap. But definitely for the second game, like I mentioned earlier, I believe it honestly plays a little bit faster there. It's more visually interesting. This is the one you want to get of the two. That's probably going to be it for this review series of what I picked up at the Waterloo Video Game Swap here. In case you're wondering why I haven't talked about stuff like the Saturn games I picked up, or any of the handheld stuff for the Game Boys stuff, it's mostly because for the Game Boy stuff, honestly, most of those are fighting game based properties, so if you're familiar with the series, you probably know it's just going to be kind of a toned down version of what's available in the full scale fighting games. Although I should mention the Takara games tend to be really nice as a whole for your King of Fighters and I believe Samurai Spirit games. Samurai Spirits. Yeah, they tend to be pretty nice kind of mini representations of it, but all in all, there's not a huge amount to talk about there. And for the other ones, I kind of honestly want to get back to my main bread and butter, being more retro ninja gaming, so I need to get some more general practice in on a given specific title, as well as I want to really get back to more blind run of Shantae Risky's Revenge, which has been sorrowfully neglected for the past bit. So once again, thank you all for watching. Be seeing you in either the next Retro Ninja Gaming or blind run of more Shantae in the next little bit. Take care and catch you all later.